The Filmmaker's Guide to Visual Effects offers a practical, detailed guide to visual effects for non-VFX specialists working in film and television. The terms special effects and visual effects are often used interchangeably in the media and even by some professionals. Historically, it made sense. In the pre-digital days and before visual effects were primarily computerized, most effects work was done in camera and on location, using miniatures, practical techniques, and various camera and optical tricks. There really wasn't a clear line of separation between special and visual effects. But things are different today, and these two terms are used to describe two distinct and very different crafts. Special effects, SFX, are practical, real-life effects performed on the set and captured by the camera. Visual effects, VFX, are digital manipulations and enhancements of the footage, and happen primarily during post-production. The knowledge, techniques, and skill sets used in each craft are widely different. Creating a practical explosion on set requires experience in explosives and pyrotechnics, while creating the VFX equivalent of that explosion calls for a mastery of computer graphics. Special effects are often shot as element plates for visual effects. In this example from Boardwalk Empire, a burning tree stump is used to augment a World War I shot. Boardwalk Empire copyright Home Box Office, HBO. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital. Core Concepts 7 and Photoreal Rendering. Despite those differences, there's still an important relationship between SFX and VFX. The two crafts often complement, and sometimes contradict, each other. This relationship, and how it translates into practical decisions on set, will be discussed in Chapter 8. What does CGI really mean? CGI stands for Computer-Generated Imagery. People, and the media, use the term CGI to talk about visual effects in general. The CGI in that movie was really awesome, or movies today have too much CGI, but in professional VFX discourse CGI, often just CG, has a much more specific meaning. It is used to make a clear distinction between VFX elements that were created artificially in the computer and real-world elements that were shot with a camera. For example, a CG ship refers to a virtual ship that was built, lit, and rendered using computer software, and then composited into the footage digitally. On the other hand, a ship, real or miniature, that was shot with a camera as an element for visual effects is not CG. A group of cheering spectators shot on green screen to be used for crowd tiling in a shot is not CG, but a group of animated digital characters is. Despite the popular use of the term, not all visual effects are CGI. In fact, many types of VFX shots do not need any CG at all, and are done solely by manipulating the footage or combining it with additional footage or still photos. The distinction is therefore important because CG indicates a different, usually more complex and expensive, process than working with photographed elements. The decision on whether to use footage or CG depends on a variety of factors, and stands at the very foundation of VFX production. It will therefore be discussed throughout the book, and in more than one context. An example for a mixed use of photographic and CG elements in one shot. First, an element of a rowboat with soldiers is shot in a lake. This is of course real footage. Sons of Liberty copyright Stephen David Entertainment, History Channel, A+E Studios. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital. VFX Fundamentals 8 Ocean and sky plates, real footage, are used to extend the lake, and different takes of the same rowboat are added to create multiple instances. Sons of Liberty copyright Stephen David Entertainment, History Channel, A+E Studios. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital. Now the large warships are added. These are CG models, built and textured from scratch. Sons of Liberty copyright Stephen David Entertainment, History Channel, A+E Studios. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital. Core Concepts 9th Final shot, with additional practical, non-CG elements like the soldiers on the ships, shot on green screen, and the seagulls, from a video I shot at the beach. Sons of Liberty copyright Stephen David Entertainment, History Channel, A+E Studios. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital. Now, at the risk of stating the obvious, I should point out that computer-generated does not mean created by the computer. It is true that visual effects depend on highly sophisticated computer software. There is certainly a lot of number crunching under the hood, probably more than in any other film-related craft. But all this technology is useless without the creative, resourceful, and highly skilled craftspeople who possess the knowledge and expertise to drive it. Looking from the outside, There's something enigmatic, even baffling, about these people who sit silently in dark rooms staring intensely at their monitors, but in essence, CG artists do pretty much what their colleagues do on set. They build, they paint, they construct, they light, they operate the camera, they shoot. 2D, 3D, and stereoscopic 3D movies are shot in a three-dimensional world. The environment, the actors, the set, and the props are all three-dimensional entities that have depth and are spatially positioned at varying distances from the camera. But the moment the action is captured by the camera, this three-dimensional world is flattened into a two-dimensional image. This is a point of no return. From now on and forever after, the movie will be in 2D. The depth dimension is gone. You can't reach with your hand through the footage to grab distant objects or measure how far they are. All visual effects are essentially performed on a two-dimensional source. This is a fundamental notion that is so easily overlooked. There really is no depth to work with, as the footage is always two-dimensional. VFX fundamentals 10. When visual effects are done by means of manipulating the footage or by adding elements that are either still photos or different footage, they are essentially done in 2D. This is similar to Photoshop work, but on moving pictures that change over time. Although a sizable portion of all VFX work is done in 2D, it is a limited workflow. It is very hard to realistically convey changes in perspective and distance solely in 2D. Much of the work we see in movies would not have been possible without the ability to create and animate three-dimensional CG elements within a virtual three-dimensional space. The 3D workflow is in fact a synthetic imitation of the way a movie is shot. Once the 3D environment, set, and props are filmed with a virtual camera, the process we call rendering, they become a series of two-dimensional images. So when we talk about 3D, we really talk about the process. The end result is still two-dimensional. The differences between the 2D and 3D workflows, and the pluses and minuses of each will be discussed in Chapter 3 along with an in-depth analysis of camera movement and how it affects the choice of workflow. There is however a certain confusion between 3D as discussed earlier, and throughout the book, and the popular, though not really accurate, use of the term 3D to describe something quite different, more accurately called stereoscopic 3D, or stereoscopy. This process creates an illusion of depth by sending slightly different images to each eye, picked up separately with the help of special glasses. Stereoscopic imagery has been around, in one form or another, since the mid-19th century. Contemporary stereoscopic films are either shot with a stereoscopic camera rig, or converted to stereo in post. The latter, obviously inferior, option requires an entire army of roto artists, see Chapter 4, that painstakingly separate foreground, midground, and background elements. For views showing different angles of a 3D cedar tree model. Model courtesy of Speed Tree. Core Concepts 11. So, to clarify, the 3D workflow itself has nothing to do with whether the movie is screened in 3D or not. Whenever 3D is mentioned in this book, it refers to the process of creating and animating CG elements in a virtual 3D space and rendering them as 2D images that are composited into the footage. This should not to be confused with stereoscopy. Realism and photorealism visual effects are constantly being judged by how real they look. This is a vital part of the discourse surrounding VFX, and for a good reason. Few filmmakers will be content with VFX that damage the believability and credibility of their movie. Yet there is something paradoxical in talking about the realism of VFX when in fact nothing in a movie is real. The actors pretend to be someone else, the set is just painted panels of plywood and styrofoam, and if you turn the camera away from the action you'll probably capture a bunch of trucks and trailers, lots of cables and boxes, and some crew members happily munching at craft service. The word real is therefore somewhat problematic. Yet there is indeed something that distinguishes VFX in this context. That something needs a more accurate word. That word is photorealism. Let's borrow the iconic scene of the sick Triceratops from Jurassic Park as an example. In that scene, the dinosaur is lying on the ground, sick, and breathing heavily. The filmmakers have two choices: they can use an animatronic Triceratops, a mechanized, motorized puppet, or they can shoot the scene empty, or with a temp dummy, and have the VFX team add a CG Triceratops in post. Now, both the animatronic and the CG Triceratops are just fake props that pretend to be the real thing. They are both lies at the service of truth, to use Henke's famous expression. Yet there is a key difference: the animatronic Triceratops is physically present on location along with the rest of the set, the props, the actors, and the lights. The camera captures the animatronic as an integral part of the environment, complete with all the intricate interaction between surfaces, lights, atmosphere, reflections and refractions, dust and smoke. This makes our animatronic, by definition, photoreal. The fact that it is just a fake puppet does not matter in this regard. At the moment the picture was taken, it was there, in front of the lens. The CG dinosaur, on the other hand, will never be captured by the camera. It will not be part of that physical interaction of light, matter, and optics. It will be rendered separately and synthetically, outside the context of the physical location environment, and then transplanted into the footage in a sort of a visual surgery. Movies are fake, but at least they are real in the eyes of the camera. In other words, anything captured by the camera is, by default, photoreal. Visual effects are not. This is why VFX artists constantly strive to make their work as photoreal as possible. Integration is a paramount concept in VFX. It's so much about integration, making the work as seamless as it can be, as if every VFX element that's been added to the footage was actually there, on location, captured by the camera. Photorealism, therefore, is not so much about making things look real as it is about making them sit realistically in the footage. Now, if we go beyond the aspect of photorealism and integration, there isn't much of a difference between our animatronic and CG dinosaurs. The believability of both fake props depends on the choice of correct materials, accurate detail, and, most of all, realistic movement. Live-action movies are VFX fundamentals. 12th Triceratops was captured in camera, along with the surrounding environment and the interactions with the actors. It is therefore 100% photoreal. But the overall realism is fully achieved thanks to the meticulous construction and texturing of the animatronic. Jurassic Park copyright Universal Pictures, Amblin Entertainment. Much less forgiving in terms of movement than animation features. There is very little room for stylized animation in an environment that has real-life actors, which accounts for the prevailing use of motion capture and visual effects, see Chapter 5. To sum it up, we can say that realism in VFX is three-leveled. On the first level, elements need to be built and surfaced with the right amount of accurate detail, just like any set piece or prop. On the second level, they need to move in a plausible fashion. On the third level, they need to look photoreal, integrated into the footage as if they were physically captured by the camera. The success of these three levels of realism depends on the work of artists who handle a wide variety of tasks, from modeling and texturing through animation to lighting and compositing. In Chapter 5 we will take a close, detailed look at each one of these tasks, or crafts, as I prefer to call them, and see how they contribute to the overall process of visual effects. The danger of overindulgence. The believability of visual effects does not depend just on the quality of animation, detail, and integration. There is another facet to it, which has less to do with the work of the VFX team and more core concepts. 13 To do with the filmmaker. Visual effects are not bound by any physical limitation. They are, in a sense, limitless, a magic playground filled with fascinating toys for the filmmaker to play with. And herein lies the danger. When visual effects are used judiciously and with respect to real-world physics and optics, and to the aesthetic conventions of filmmaking, they become an integral and coherent part of the movie and its story. But when the temptation to use every available VFX toy crosses the fragile border of artistic sensibility, when VFX are tossed in just because it's possible, they are likely to become an irritating excess that throws the film off its balance and the viewers off the story. We once worked with a director who wanted almost every VFX shot to have a dramatic sky. We struggled to explain that throwing in a sky that does not match the lighting of the original footage or the surrounding shots will not help the movie. Rather, we argued, it will cause the VFX shots to pop out in the context of the sequence, creating a dissonance that screams, "Attention everyone, this is a VFX shot." Visual effects are like magic tricks, the magic only works when the trick is hidden. It is of course the responsibility of the VFX team to create the perfect magic, but it is also the responsibility of the filmmaker not to overindulge in the use of this magic. Animation, games, and visual effects. It is customary to warp these three crafts into a single entity, and it's true that they share similar tools and techniques. But there are some key differences between animation, games, and VFX, and it's important to discuss them here. First, to clarify, animation is of course an integral part of the processes of visual effects and games production. But in the context of this discussion, animation refers to the specific genre of his frame from Brave shows Pixar's signature attention to lighting, texture, and detail. Yet the overall look is stylized, and the focus is on expression, mood, and aesthetics rather than realism. Brave copyright Walt Disney Pictures, Pixar Animation Studios. VFX Fundamentals 14. With every year that passes, games look and feel increasingly realistic, as in this example from Fallout 4. But the limitations of real-time playability still require compromises, noticeable here in the foreground rocks, the broken windshield, and the plants. Fallout 4 copyright ZeniMax Media Incorporated, Bethesda Game Studios. Fully animated feature films, or shorts, such as the ones that come out of Pixar, Disney, or DreamWorks for example. The convention in this genre is that everything is CG, from the characters to their surroundings, and no live footage is used. This allows for a certain unity and coherence of the entire environment, since everything is created on the computer and rendered together. Take, for example, a Pixar classic like Finding Nemo. The animation is stylized, well, it's about a talking fish, and the environment is not quite photoreal, yet the result feels immersive, detailed, and extremely convincing. Now take Nemo and his surroundings, and drop them into real underwater footage, and they will look and feel noticeably artificial. In this respect, visual effects differ significantly from animation. As previously mentioned, adding CG elements to live-action footage dictates a strict adherence to photorealism and realistic movement. This shifts much of the focus from the design of enticing CG characters and environments and the use of stylized movement, to the integration of CG elements with live-action footage and the heavy use of motion capture for realistic movement. Video games are similar to animation in the sense that they are a complete virtual creation rather than a mix of live footage and CG. But the process of creating a game presents two additional challenges. First, in most cases the game's protagonists need to be able to move around freely, which means that everything around them must be designed and built as a fully three-dimensional environment. VFX on the other hand are often created solely for the camera, since the footage already dictates what we see and core concepts 15 don't see. There's really no need to spend time and resources working on parts that are hidden or outside the frame. The second challenge for games is that they must be rendered in real time, and while the capabilities of graphics cards are constantly on the rise and the level of realism in games is improving tremendously, game creators still face strict limitations on the amount of detail they can put in. Visual effects do not abide by this rule. With no real-time rendering limitations, shots can be extremely complex and detailed, which of course facilitates much higher levels of photorealism and visual quality than games. In Chapter 10, I look at the not-so-distant prospect of real-time rendering at full VFX quality. VFX and the digital revolution. Some might argue that digital revolution is an overstatement. I embrace this term fully. Digital technology truly affected almost every aspect of our lives, for good or for worst. As far as visual effects are concerned, it's more than a revolution, it's a founding event. VFX as we know today could not have been possible without the ability to convert images into a series of numbers, and the development of computers that could handle and manipulate these numbers and spit out virtual imagery. Before digital technologies took center stage, visual effects were achieved through a combination of on-set and in-camera practical work, animatronics, stop motion, painted glass panels, optical tricks, and chemical film manipulations. Some of the most beautiful and creative visual effects in the history of film have been done with such non-digital means, from Georges Méliès' 1902 Sierra Leonean Leone's Voyage dans la Lune to George Lucas's 1977 Star Wars. Yet the dinosaurs that roamed Jurassic Park could not have been created, animated, and rendered without the emerging digital technologies and 3D applications, and, of course, the brave and talented team at ILM. These technologies did not only open up almost endless new possibilities for visual effects, they revolutionized their use in the industry, from unique events in a handful of movies to a widespread filmmaking tool that's used extensively in every genre and on any budget. Digital versus film. Not so long ago, video cameras were practically a taboo in cinema, and were used almost exclusively in the TV domain. But the past few years have seen giant leaps in the development of digital cameras, which lead to a massive shift toward digital cinematography. Not only do digital cameras like Arri Alexa and Red Epic provide similar results to film cameras in terms of color depth, light sensitivity, and resolution, but today's filmmakers also have a wide choice of small portable video cameras that offer an astounding image quality for their size and price. Subsequently, the use of film media has seen a very sharp decline. There are still some cinematographers and directors who will only shoot film, but they are facing an increasingly challenging situation, as many film stocks are becoming hard to find and fewer labs are now equipped to process film. There is indeed a certain quality and feel to film that is hard to replicate with even the best digital cameras. Yet I should point out that from the visual effects standpoint, VFX Fundamentals 16 digital media, if shot well, of course, is in fact preferable to film. Since visual effects are done digitally, the film stock must first be converted to digital. This is done by scanning the film, a delicate process that, if performed incorrectly or with badly calibrated scanners, may produce wobbly, inconsistent imagery. We had some nightmarish experiences in the past with badly scanned film that was so jittery we had to resort to some tricky spline warping to get the VFX elements to stick to the footage. The fact that fewer labs now have the right equipment or experienced personnel to handle film scanning makes this issue even more problematic. So, if you want to shoot film and plan to use VFX, do make sure that the scanning and processing is done by a trustable lab and experienced technicians. Otherwise, shooting with high-quality digital cameras ensures a smoother VFX process down the line. Film versus television. Film and television used to be miles apart in terms of visual quality. VHS was simply not comparable to film, and since the media was inherently limited, as was the budget, fewer resources were spent on the visual side of TV productions. Consequently, visual effects in TV programs were used sparsely, and their quality was considerably lower than VFX created for film. Those days are gone. Television is now on par with movies in terms of quality of content, some say even better, at least in the USA. And as far as visual quality goes, the gap between TV and film has narrowed down considerably. Most home TVs are now HD resolution, or higher, and the same digital cameras are now used to shoot TV and cinema. The level of complexity and the quantity of visual effects in TV programs has increased significantly, with TV series such as HBO's Game of Thrones pushing the quality bar ever higher. When we worked on Boardwalk Empire, we were treating it as a feature film, applying the same high standards to the VFX work as if we were working on a movie, and interestingly, Boardwalk Empire was actually shot on film. There are differences, however. Budgets for TV productions are still much lower, on average, than film, and the schedule is usually much tighter. This forces VFX teams to come up with creative and technical solutions to compensate for the limited resources and time. This is not necessarily a bad thing. The experience gained on TV productions can be used for low-budget features as well. But besides the budget and schedule differences, working with VFX on film and television today is very much the same. Therefore, everything in this book applies equally to film and TV, and although I use the words film and movie for convenience, they can always be substituted with TV program or series. Commercials and music videos also make extensive use of CG and visual effects. These are much shorter formats than feature film or TV series, and as such have a much shorter turnaround time. They also differ in their approach. Often the focus in commercials is to make the product, or the advertised concept, visually enticing and attractive, sometimes at the expense of photorealism, while the style of many music videos lies on the fringe between photoreal CG and stylized motion graphics. Yet despite these differences, commercials and music videos share the same VFX concepts and workflows as film and TV, and much of this book applies to these fields as well. Core Concept 17 Visual Effects in Service of a TV Docudrama. A quarry in West Virginia is getting a VFX makeover to look like the Panama Canal under construction, in the History Channel miniseries The Men Who Built America. The Men Who Built America copyright Stephen David Entertainment, History Channel, Lionsgate Films Home Entertainment. Visual effects by Brainstorm Digital.